Yeah, I've had the opportunity to serve ambassador posts under President Reagan, President George H.W. Bush, and President George W. Bush.
Excellent.
I'm excited about supporting Governor Romney in his presidential campaign.
What principle does Governor Romney use when deciding to go to war or not?
Well, I think the first principle is he's been very clear that he supports the United States role and that this should be the American century, which means we don't lead from behind, but we lead from the front. We try to rebuild our military, including increasing the shipbuilding of our Navy so we can project power. We are willing to work with others at the UN and elsewhere, but when we need to act alone or in a smaller coalition of the willing, we should do it to protect our interests. And it means that in dealing with countries like China who are cheating on currency, or Iran that's an existential threat, we shouldn't take things off the table and we should be robust. That's particularly true with Iran as they develop a nuclear weapon.
If another country has harbored terrorists that have attacked us, should we go to war with that country?
Well, he agrees that the global war on terror requires us to target terror and those that harbor them. Now, whether we go to war or use other means depends on the situation. But he's absolutely clear if it's using drones, using other powers of leverage and influence, that he's willing to do it in the war on terror, because it's a war we must win.
So I'm not clear what the principle is. You say he's in favor of defending America, but what is the principle that would permit us to know, to determine when we should go to war and when we shouldn't? I gave you an example, and you said, well, maybe we should go to war or maybe not.
Look, I've been in the foreign policy business with senior positions with 3 presidents over 30 years. And each decision to use American military might is based on the particulars of that situation. Whether it was Grenada, whether it was the Desert Storm, whether it was the war in Afghanistan. Having said that, you have to be absolutely clear about what American interests are, and you have to be cold-eyed and willing to have a credible threat of military action, and you have to have a willingness to use it if you must. And tonight, Governor Romney said that he would do all he can through peaceful means to try to stop the Iranian quest for nuclear breakout. Tougher sanctions, including unilateral sanctions, supporting the independence efforts, regime change, and as a last resort, he would use military force if it was required to stop Iran developing nuclear weapons. So in that specific case, if everything else is exhausted, and Iran's about to develop nuclear weapons, he said he would be willing to use force.
So I'm not clear what the principle is. Are you saying that there isn't a, well, let me see if I understand. Are you saying that there isn't a principle that in each case you have to determine ad hoc or based on the circumstances what to do, but there isn't any particular principle that would permit us to know when he would be in favor of going to war and when he would be against it?
What he has said is when American security is threatened, he is willing to look at military force. And in the case of Iran, you have a specific.
So I got it. If American security is at risk,
if American lives are at risk,
if American security is at risk, then he thinks we should go to war. What principle does he use to determine when American security is at risk? Because that's kind of an amorphous phrase. We don't know, was American security at risk in Iraq? Was it at risk in Libya? Was it at risk in Afghanistan?
You're asking a fair question, and I understand why you want to have a cookie-cutter answer. But the use of force is such a serious and consequential decision. The president's going to have to consider it by a case-by-case basis. And if you look at the various cases of use of war, like Grenada, it was to protect American citizens in Grenada at risk. If you look at the use of force in Lebanon, it was because an ally was in danger. If you look at the use of force in Desert Storm, it was because a nation was invaded, international law trampled, and our oil was at risk. So it's not as simple as saying in every situation you weigh it, but you have security interests, you have vital interests, you have values that animate what you do. It would be irresponsible to say A, B, C, and then we go to war. That's not how a president acts.
Do you think it would be irresponsible to have a clear principle that said A, B, C, then we go to war? If it's A, B, C, F, we don't go to war? You think that's irresponsible to be clear about when we should go to war and when we shouldn't?
I think it's irresponsible for the President of the United States to try to anticipate the unanticipable. You know, there's certain events that you can't predict. No one predicted the Arab Spring and what happened there. It is not an academic exercise to put American lives in danger.
Okay, so there is no clear-cut principle. That's what I asked you in the beginning. So every case is different, and you decide based on the circumstances. Is that correct?
American lives should be prepared to defend our security and protect American lives and our vital interests, including economic interests. We have a wide range of tools to try to do that. The most extreme...
I see, so it's not...
military.
Okay.
Let me finish. The most extreme is military. You have to have a credible threat that you're willing to use that. Governor Romney's made clear he is, but it would be irresponsible to say, yes, A, B, C, and then we automatically use military force.
Okay, so it's not only American lives, it's American economic interests. So if a country doesn't want to sell us oil, then should we go to war?
No.
Okay, so why do we go to war in Kuwait if, what was the reason? Were there any American lives at stake in Kuwait that we were defending when we went there?
Part of the reason America's safe is because of law. And international law was violated by the illegal invasion of Saddam Hussein, of his neighbor. Secondly, no, it's not as simple as you'd like it to be.
Okay.
Secondly, in the case of Kuwait, there was a clear and present danger to Saudi Arabia and other allies who we have treaty commitments to. So yes, there were a number of factors. Now one alone stood in that case, as is often the case when military force is used.
So there aren't any conditions that are necessary and sufficient prior to the decision. You say...
Well, let me be clear, though.
You say...
Come up with scenarios where you'd go to war. If we're attacked...
Well, let me ask you a question. You say that when economic interests are at stake, we should go to war as well.
I didn't say that, sir.
Oh, in Kuwait.
I understand you want to have simple answers, and you want to try...
Clarity we want.
You want simple answers. Too simplistic for the issue you're dealing with. Now, are economic interests vital? Yes. Are they enough alone in most circumstances to use military force? Probably not.
That's what I'm trying
but
to
they're
get at.
relevant.
When is it that security, economic interests, and what other interests are required? In other words, what conditions are necessary and sufficient to go to war? You say if economic interests are involved and something else.
We've gone through this. You and I clearly are in different wavelengths because you want to drive an answer, and I'm not going to answer them the way you like. Give me particular fact situations, and I'll respond.
Okay. Should we have gone to war in Libya?
Governor Romney has said that he supported the humanitarian mission. However, he has also said he disagreed with the fact that the president did not have a clear mission. He disagreed that the president said it would be days, not weeks, and in turn it took months. He disagreed that it was prosecuted in a way that took many months. Many people died. At the same time, we are better off because Gaddafi is gone.
Okay, I'm sorry. Were American lives at stake in that case?
No.
Were American economic interests at stake?
You know what was at stake? There was a threat to thousands and thousands of innocent people. as was the case in Rwanda.
So in that case, it had nothing to do with security interest or economic interest. It had to do with some other question.
Values aren't irrelevant. Thank you.
Okay.